Mexico.
Mexico.
All right, here we go, guys. We are starting, and we have a lot to cover. Honestly, this is one of my favorite lectures just when we were doing this. Okay, decolonization and the spread of liberalism. What else? We'll throw in here guerrilla warfare. Is all at the base of this. Now I'm going to do India first, and I'm going to do it kind of fast, mostly because I want to focus more on Mexico. This chapter also has the rest of South America and Argentina, which deals with Evita. I think it has some somewhat inappropriate stuff on it. It's starring Madonna and Antonio Banderas, or Puss in Boots, in one of my favorite musicals done, where basically Eva Perón is the wife and former movie star of Juan Perón, who is a socialist fascist. We're not quite sure. He doesn't quite define himself politically enough. He is considered pink in the Cold War, and I'll talk about him there. That means he's not communist, but he's also not pro-American. And so Juan Perón, they have the same last name because they're married. Eva eventually dies, and she sings "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina." Anyhow, the reason she's famous is because basically she represented Argentina and her country far better than her husband did, and she went to Europe and did these large things, and it's kind of a move towards female leadership. Got it there? And so the South Americans in general tend to be kind of progressive, for lack of a better term, towards women's movements. And then as that enters the Cold War, that's going to lead to women protests in particular, because they'll take the men away and make them disappear. You know, the communists or the dictators, whatever it is, will. But the women will get to sit there and where did my sons go, and cry out, or where did my husband go, and cry out and protest. And so women protests kind of become a sign of, I'll say, kind of the women's rights increasing throughout the world. But this is kind of a bit of is Argentina entering into the state of it's a first world country and engaging the rest of Europe. And part of that is that everyone respects Eva or Evita Perón, and then she dies. Okay, which is why the musical is so tragic.
Die, even though he was less good.
Juan Perón, would stay. He stays in power probably 20 years. Mind you, again, this is all it's not pro-American, so it's very weird to me that we wrote a musical about the wife of a socialist dictator. Everyone kind of get the connections here. It's very strange to me on a certain level, but it is good. And the whole idea is there's a good interplay actually between Antonio Banderas as the narrator, who is constantly writing her that she's never good enough. So part of what kills her, quote unquote, is that she can never live up to the actual hype that she actually is. And it's a very I'll say it this way, it's one of my favorite musicals, but it's also because I'm a history nerd, and you get the idea. So as Mr. Henderson would say, I think I'm a dork. Is that the right term? There you go. Anyhow, moving there. Okay, so with that, you guys can look at that. It stars Madonna, which automatically means you probably shouldn't watch it. And then, but it stars Antonio Banderas too, which automatically means you should watch it, because, Puss in Boots. Okay, moving on to India. There needs to be more said about this, and I might at a future lecture, but I'm going to keep it relatively short. Okay, India is the ultimate example of decolonization. The British have been controlling it since the 1780s in one form or another, and now it is 1948, if I remember right, is the date when the British finally left. Now, understand, leading up to this leave date, to this independence date, has been a whole set of independence date. If you remember the last time we talked about India, they had formed the Indian National Congress. I'm not going to write it out there. And it was started by, I don't think you say it this way, Roy. His last name is Roy. And it leads to two guys, Nehru and Gandhi, who are fighting to, Jinnah, who are fighting to get independence altogether. Now, Jinnah is a Muslim. Gandhi is a kind of a radical Hindu, as is Nehru, and Nehru really is the guy that puts in a prime ministerial system. So when you look at India, it'll look like British government, which is kind of natural when you're talking about it. So when the British leave in 1948, and they've been particularly with Gandhi, there's a whole set of protests because the British are regulating the Indians in a lot of ways, and he wants to get rid of them. But he's also anti-industrial. And so one of his protests is, always think of this one, is the salt protest, which you're protesting salt. He basically takes the workers from the industrial salt factory that is in India, that's producing it through machines. Hey, where are you supposed to be?
Weights.
Oh wait, you came in?
Yeah.
No.
And then he, Ike is in here, Ava and Adelina, or whatever that's worth. The basic idea is when you see that, you're looking at salt protests are a massive deal, and then they take thousands of workers and he hikes them, marches them to make a show of it, and a lot of people mimic him. Like if you know anything about Cesar Chavez, he'll mimic him, as does Martin Luther King Jr. And hikes them all the way to the beach, and then they sit there and do salting the traditional way, which is take a pan, fill it with ocean water, and let it evaporate.
Okay, but if they found a better way, then they shouldn't be like going backwards.
British imperialists. How are you for British imperialism, Joy? Okay. Anyhow, does that make sense? And so that's a radical turn against industrialism, is one of the things he's pushing. Does that make sense? And so your reaction, Joy, is actually mine too, at a certain level. Because for all goodness sake, for whatever you want, you do not want to go back to traditional ways of making corn and having your cow poop all over your field. Got it? Does that make sense? So anyhow, we are living in an industrial world, and so there's some advantages to that, but he is highlighting those. But then mostly he's trying to get free. They're trying to decolonize. It is time for India to have their own country. And if you ever watch this movie, which is starring Ben Kingsley, which is the what's that guy, the actor guy in Iron Man 3 and in Shang-Chi, that guy. He plays Gandhi in a movie. Do you know who I'm talking about? Sorry, you know Marvel guys?
I think so.
Wait, I kind of know what
There's
you're
multiple
saying.
guys in Iron Man.
I know,
The
yeah.
terrorist in Iron Man 3 that's on the
The
video.
real terrorist or
No.
the fake
Do you want me to
The
look at
fake
cast
terrorist.
so I can, like-
That, yeah. The actor plays an actor.
He plays
Yes.
Gandhi.
Yeah, he plays Gandhi, and he won Best Actor for it.
Wow.
Got it. There you go. And a 4-hour epic that you guys are all going to watch this weekend right after you finish Evita. Anyhow, if you follow his life, basically he is this very active 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, and then when they start to split, almost immediately there becomes this fracture because right here, right, the Hindus and the Muslims can't get along. Got it? So the British leave, and now they basically need to take the Indian continent, which I'm going to draw ugly here, and it just goes like this. And there becomes the country of Pakistan. Okay? And so what you tend to see here is this is an interesting form of nationalism. Now, Indian National Congress, when the British imagine it, they're imagining that this will stay one big unolithic India, and there is no such thing as unolithic India. Even in terms of like languages, there are dozens of languages in the continent of India. And then when you're talking about ethnicities, right, like the people from the Tamil kingdoms in the south don't necessarily identify with what's going on in Kashmir up in the north. And then now you have this religious divide. What's kind of surprising though is unlike nationalism from the ethnic side of it, this one's going to break on religion. But just like Turkey and Greece and Armenia, right, here's what happens. All the Muslims that are here go into Pakistan. And in Pakistan, all the Hindus that are there come back over here. Now, this is great for Muslims and Hindus at a certain thing, unless you're the group that lives right there, which are the Sikhs. Got it?
Oh.
So there is a minority religion that is the 5th largest religion in the world that is in between the two. Got it? And now just got all of their land stolen on both sides of the border because because basically Muslims are trying to figure out new homesteads and new farms. And so they're like, you're not Muslim, this is Pakistan, get out, right? And then they go back on the other side of the border and they're like, you're not Hindu, you get the idea? And so that's going to create the Sikhs becoming a diaspora. This is why, guys. So I always think about this, I always describe this if I haven't already, but like the first time I mentioned Gandhi, like in a Bible class with a Sikh student in there, I go, Gandhi, okay, imagine there's a really good guy like Gandhi, you know, peaceful protests and all this sort of stuff. At this point, nobody thinks Gandhi is a good guy anymore. I've realized that. But the basic idea is, like, why does he get to go to heaven or something? And they're like, the Sikh kid raises their hand and they're like, Gandhi is not a good guy. He sold us out. And so a lot of the Sikhs recognize that their land, there's a little state of the Punjab, which I'm assuming, Tanvir, you're going to next week. And you said you'd see the Golden Temple,
Don't know if I'll be able to get inside though.
but you'll be right next to it, you'll see it. So that's where like their center is, their location. And then, basically they believe about, I would say it this way, about a third of Pakistan would be considered traditional Sikh homes, or where they were. It might have been more in a mixed, like some Muslims, some Sikhs. But it's all part of the traditional Mughal Empire. And they're like, nope, you gave us like a small area, right? Does that make sense? And so that's going to create frustration because here they got their own country, the Hindus did, the Pakistanis got their own countries, over here is Bangladesh, the Buddhists get their own country, but the Sikhs do not. Got it there? And that sense of like, how far do you fracture in terms of nationalism before you try to create a coalition, right, goes on there. And they feel like Gandhi did not defend their lands, so now they don't, Gandhi and Nehru both of them are ending up like frustrated. The Sikhs ended up frustrated because basically they got traded out. Got it? In order to keep peace with the Muslims, their frustrations are mounting. Fascinating enough to the United States history, which is key to the Cold War, both Pakistan and India have traditionally been our allies. And we have often, particularly with Pakistan, they've often been the middle road between us and talking to communist countries like China. India is the largest democracy or republic country in the world, so that spread of liberalism is going on there. But Pakistan, which is kind of alternated between democracy and dictatorship, is sometimes set up as one of the, like, we like having them in the Muslim world because they help us bridge the gap between that. Then the Sikhs just feel, hey, what about us? Because Pakistan and India both have their human rights issues. Okay, I'm gonna stop there because I wanna spend a bunch of time on Mexico. So, any questions on that? Okay, just when you think about this, they have a unique form of nationalism. It's a religious form of nationalism. The Sikhs, which is not mentioned in your book, I'm sure of it, you guys can totally use that as part of like your essays and stuff. I usually pretty traditionally give a India DBQ. One of my all-time favorite DBQs was centered around the sport of cricket. None of you know anything about it except for maybe Tanvir. And like, it came from Britain, it has all these things, and it's like the largest rivalry in the world is the India cricket team, national team, versus the Pakistani cricket team. And since they play cricket games for like a month, right, it's like crazy as they're going on there. Okay, Mexico. Guys, I would say if I was teaching regular world history, again, I like thinking of history as like we are in America, people from some sort of diaspora. That's how I think of it. So like, it's easy to think of the Armenian diaspora that got kicked out of their towns and now ended up in Fresno, or the Sikh diaspora and got kicked out of towns. You don't tend to think about the Mexican diaspora getting kicked out of town. Got it? And so I'm trying to explain to you guys like even some of the sort of things of why we originated there, and it all goes back to the Mexican Revolution. Now, define this from the Mexican independence. Mexican independence, even if you remember they were taken over by France, right? And then Cinco de Mayo is in some way celebrating them kicking out the French, right? The basic idea are totally different than what is the Mexican Revolution. And this is the thing about the Mexican Revolution, it stands kind of as the first time in history where it kind of turns into mass anarchy, guerrilla warfare, chaos. Got it? And historically speaking, that's going to lead to a destabilization of Mexico and all sorts of things that are going on there. Now, there you go. This is my book. This is one of my favorite history books. Why? It is just pictures. That's all it is. A bunch of pictures. There you go. This right here is going to show you the relationship of all the guys going on there. This is Emiliano Zapata and all the things that are going on here. And you just see it's an absolute mess. So I'll show you guys with pictures what is going on with this, but flip through it and you'll get kind of the feel of why the Mexican Revolution occurs. Now, what is the Mexican Revolution? First off, we just moved back to pre-World War I. So I believe, if I remember, the start date is 1911, okay? Now, I'm going to remind you, the guy who won the battle at Cinco de Mayo or whatever is Porfirio Diaz. And he is old now, like 80-something, you know, like our president. But that has nothing to do with it. Diaz is old now, and he has created a problem because basically he has made the wealthy super rich, okay? And so this is true with any Latin American country, but for Mexico, this is true too. Remember the hacienda system? So the hacienda system basically makes it like, so that there's like, I'll just go 15 owners of 85% of the land in Mexico. Got it there? So like when you imagine some of the movies of, even like I'll say the Western movies, where like you've got like this little small like Mexican town that's just like kind of like surviving in subsistence farming, and then you'll have this like rich, you know, like farm somewhere near off. That's almost like the whole system is kind of sitting there. And what Porfirio Diaz has done is he has improved, particularly Mexico City, by making deals with foreigners, particularly America, and basically making trains and the such. Got it there? And so Mexico is getting progressively forward in terms of like the wealthy, and they're starting to do all this stuff, and they're starting to import stuff, and they've let companies in like ExxonMobil. Okay, ExxonMobil is coming in and starting to use Mexican gas. Got it there? We're taking petroleum and shipping it over Mexico and the United States, but who's making the money? The United States. And that'll be traded for build a new palace in Mexico City by Porfirio Diaz. Got it? Meanwhile, there are a bunch of subsistence farmers scratching existence off in a mild desert and not very happy. So, what do we need? Because this is the time period. We need somebody that's going to fix this problem. We need an idealist. We need a socialist. And this is one of my favorite characters in history, just in terms of like, here's how to start a revolution, and then like, whoops, I started a revolution, okay? His name is Madero, okay? So this is the first guy,
Like
Madero. Not Madeira, Madero. I just think it's like, sort of idea. And he is a vegetarian.
Wait,
He
how long
is
ago was this?
a socialist, 1910. He is well educated. He comes along and he is like, this is all of Mexico's problems. We need to take care of the poor because we're socialists and we need to take care of the poor. And so he goes in, and after fighting a little bit back and forth from like a standpoint, Porfirio Diaz is basically ruling over a fake Congress sort of thing. He's the dictator, but he's got a Congress going up there. Madero comes up through and is like, socialism for the poor people. And Porfirio Diaz is like, get out of my country. And then kicks him out. And then he comes back, and he's basically like, we're going to get rid of Porfirio Diaz. No one supports him anymore. He's like 80-something odd years old. And so he goes in and coups him out. So notice here, this is part of when you think of modern warfare, the bloodless coup, right, that doesn't kill anyone, is there. And as Porfirio Diaz is leaving to his exile in Europe, he tells Madero, he's like, it looks like congratulations, you're now leading Mexico. You've also just grabbed a tiger by the tail. And the analogy there is well put, because basically the country of Mexico is going to turn into a war-torn mess. All of the guys I'll mention from here on out will all get killed in some form of the war. Okay, so think of American Revolution for a moment. We're like, George Washington, revolutionary, started the government. For Mexico, none of that's true. and it's going to create a weird, I'm just going to say political instability, lack of trust, regionalism that is even harsher than what's in the United States. Like say the American South does not get along with the American West or the American North for various reasons. I'll say it this way, it matters if you're from the state of Chihuahua or the state of Sonora, both of those directly below our borders, and those two states don't like each other. And to the point where even today, if you're crossing into one or the other, it will be at gunpoint. Got it? Baja, Mexico, by the way, the other state that's to the south of us, is pretty much for tourists. Like it's just, go have fun. Got it? And so like when you think about that, that's gonna, because it's going to, well, do this. Now, the most hated guy in the whole thing is General Huerta. What happens is Huerta sees the socialists and he says, this isn't manly enough. Okay, I have to say something here about this thing. The machismo, we've heard this term before, a mentality in Mexico is very much a bigger deal than like, I'll even say what that would mean in America. Because that sounds like something a Mexican wrestler does to me. But the reality is the belief that I am the big man, I'm the boss, I'm the warlord, I'm the general, whatever it is, and I have power over you. And all these guys are also all married to multiple wives in multiple towns. And it leads to kind of a, when I say rape and pillage, it kind of means it literally, sort of fighting. All of that starts to exist, creating a great fear. Okay, and General Huerta starts this. He basically looks at this and goes, this is sissy stuff. I need to take it over. I have control. He was a general under the army. I have control of the army. I'm going to take the army and we're going to start taking over Mexico, particularly Mexico City in the south. And he sits there because he's kind of a northern guy, and he moves his army down to the south and starts to take over stuff. And he starts to walk into a village and he holds all the villagers at gunpoint and says, join our army, or else what? Or else I'm going to rape and pillage. And that's what like forces a bunch of guys into the army. Mind you, they may rape and pillage anyhow. Got it there? And that's what the former Mexican army is doing that would have like protected Porfirio Diaz. So he comes in, and this guy lasted a solid 6 months before he is eliminated from life. Because he is basically going to be killed there. And like Porfirio Diaz was 100% right. He just opened up a can of worms, okay? Which then brings us to the major players, because Huerta is not an idealist. This is just a straight general, like, dictator. Like, this guy is not going to last because there's too many liberal Republican ideas. If you guys remember, Benito Juarez was like their Abraham Lincoln that set up their constitution. They have like these like kind of liberalist values, kind of like the United States. And then now you have a dictator in charge of it, and now you have a bunch of warlords going, let us bring back the republic. Okay. So now for the warlords. Okay, I'm calling them warlords, that's not even fair. The most famous one is Pancho Villa. Why is Pancho Villa the most famous? Does anyone know? They haven't even heard of Pancho Villa.
Because his first name is Pancho and that's the
There are two reasons why Pancho Villa is famous. Number one, he is one of the only people to actually attack America. Okay, he will invade New Mexico and shoot up a base on the southern part of New Mexico. Got it? Number two, he hired a New York City film, think in this in terms of technology and war, like war history. He filmed the whole thing. He basically has a 1915 film, silent film. We have a whole bunch of Pancho Villa, and when they do a battle, they then reenact it for the film cameras. And they send it all the way around through everywhere, and Pancho Villa is the rebel fighting against General Huerta at the beginning, and then he attacks America at the end, and then they send the same general that we'll send to John Pershing down into Mexico to go find Pancho Villa. Guess what? America never found him. Got it? Okay, what is Pancho Villa fighting for? A lot of people think he actually represents the best values out of any of the actual revolutionaries that are going on, but nobody really knows. Okay, one of the funny notes about him is he is amongst the teetotalers. That is, he never drinks. Okay, which in a machismo culture is a little weird, but I'm also going to put it this way: he's also just not like he's just not like like your average guy. He's like a progressive thinking, I'm going to use film, I'm going to advertise our things that are going on, and I'm going to take over Mexico City. Benito Juarez. Okay, he's from Chihuahua, which is below New Mexico and Texas. Okay, so you can kind of Chihuahua. So that is a state. I'm not talking, about the dogs particularly, but that is the state. Benito Juarez. He is from Morales, and Morales is like the middle of Mexico. It's the sticks. It's the very poor, and this is the type of guy that comes in and he goes, "This should be about land distribution." Okay, let me explain. Well, I think you can imagine at this moment. Land redistribution, I should have put there. There's the re. Hacienda. The biggest problem in Mexico is what? For him, it's bad leadership, right? For him, the rich people have control of all the land and the peasants have none. And so he has one thing that he wants to get pushed through. Get rid of the rich people and all the land gets given over to everyone, gets given over to the peasants. Aaron got it there? Now that's a radical shift, a radical ideology. Nobody has forced this, but let's get rid of all, just picture it here. Just picture in our own culture. We're going to take all the rich farmers, take the land from them, and then move on, say all the farm workers. All the farm workers are going to have their own like 5 acres or whatever. And then we're going to do that. That is how Benito Juarez thinks. He is quiet. Him and his army, I'll put it in quotes, basically can just fade into nothing. They are like, we're fighting a war one day, and then the next day they are gone. They're completely disbanded as an army, and nobody even knows who was fighting who. And so they're building on this. And then finally one I'm going to put on here is Obregon. Obregon is from Sonora. He has the best quotes about the whole thing. He'll get his arm shot off and continue to fight. And he is a total nihilist. A nihilist believes in nothing, believes there's no point in war, and does this sort of idea. And this rivalry between Sonora and Chihuahua is going to mean the main fighting is going to happen in the north. Okay, and that, which is kind of surprising because Mexico City is in the south. Aaron got a picture there. And so, but these two are kind of the guys that are going on there. And I mentioned him because he's going to combine with, not Calles, not Lázaro Cárdenas, but Carranza. I'll just put them together. And basically, if I outline the war, it's going on there. Now, here's what happens, because I just noticed I mentioned 3 C's. So at the end of the war is the 3 C's. These are the guys that are mainly think warriors fighting it. Now, there are a whole bunch of other warlords fighting this. They get eliminated and then they're gone. These are the guys that kind of lasted for a while. But remind you, I said it at the beginning, all of them will be dead by the end of the revolution. So at this point, we need to describe what happens in Mexico City. General Huerta takes it over. Pancho Villa and General Huerta are both part of the army and hate each other. In fact, Pancho Villa was under Huerta in the army at one point in time. And Pancho Villa's like, we're going to beat Huerta. So he finds Benito Juarez, says, yes, I'll be about land distribution. And they basically pincher Huerta somewhere near Mexico City and eliminate his army and eliminate Huerta, because there's no way we're going to let General Huerta win because he started this whole mess. Got it? And then I think even the picture on the front of my book here is it's you can see it's got the mural style. So one of the things, art in the Mexican Revolution becomes this mural style, which Mexican art is always kind of based around the mural, and is got all the artists there. But this is them sitting on the palace, on the throne of all people, Cortez. So Mexico City never lost the idea that hey, the Spanish conquistadors, Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, all that sort of stuff. And these two guys, Pancho Villa right here, Benito Juarez right there, are basically sitting on the throne, but they have one big problem. They don't have the army to support and holding up Mexico City. So for a week, they hold it up, and then they realize they're going to lose. Benito Juarez doesn't care and just takes his group of, they almost feel like okay, in the right, understand here the term, because terrorist, right? We think terrorist, you think of something 9/11 and the terrible things that are done there. I'm saying, is this a freedom fighter or a terrorist? is the really hardest things. But they're just like, what all I'm pointing out here is they just dissipate because they're used to guerrilla warfare. Got it there? They don't need to hold together. And then Pancho Villa realizes that these two guys are going to beat him. And so coming into power is going to be Carranza. Obregon is the general that fights. Carranza is going to lead in Mexico City. Carranza is so scared in Mexico City that he will not leave the palace. That's how scared he is. He's scared that this guy got killed, this guy got killed, these guys are still out on the loose, and I'm literally stuck in Mexico City. Well, all this political destabilization is causing all kinds of problems throughout the world. And so he sends Obregon to go look for Pancho Villa, and then leaves himself completely open in Mexico City to being able to be attacked. Well, he keeps himself alive while trying to organize a government and trying to get it going. And so nothing is really happening here. And he is just basically paranoid, trying to send and kill these guys, the other revolutionaries. So the revolutionaries are killing revolutionaries. They didn't try to, here, let's all come together and like form a constitution, sort of idea. And that situation lasts for a number of years. Obregon beats Pancho Villa's army, and Pancho Villa is left for dead. But then all of a sudden he comes back from that, and Benito Juarez shows up, and guerrilla warfare attacks him, and then just weakens Obregon, and they're just stuck there for like a year, while Carranza is like in his thing going, is Obregon going to kill me? That, by the way, is when Obregon lost his arm. Got it? Everyone kind of picture it there? And then, just so you know, and one of my favorite moments, where did I learn all this? I read a 900-page book on the Mexican Revolution, which is absolutely terrifyingly terrible. There's so much death and like destruction sort of idea. On a bench in Disneyland, waiting for the electric light parade, because when my daughters were like 3 and 4, I didn't care about going to Disneyland anymore. I just wanted them to have a front row seat at the electric light parade, and I succeeded. And then like fairies danced with my daughters while I'm reading a Mexican Revolution book. Anyhow, does that make sense? that makes me a dork, doesn't it? Okay, moving on. The basic idea what you guys are doing is Obregon is there, and then Carranza's there, and then finally Carranza gets I'm gonna get killed, and he goes, I gotta sneak out of town, out of Mexico City, and so he jumps up on the train to get out of town, and the train explodes.
Why?
Because somebody wanted to kill Carranza, because this is absolutely terrible. So one of the pictures is just an exploded train. Now, let's describe to you guys what I mean by the type of warfare they're doing. I think I might have told you this in World War I. They started to put dynamite onto the trains and would just send it down the train track and explode whatever's going on there. So think, if you're Pancho Villa, you don't care what's going down in the south, and you know that you'll somehow mess up Puerta, or you'll mess up Obregon, or you'll mess up whoever's in Mexico City, you could just send dynamite on a train, and the train system becomes almost unusable. And so think about that in terms of industrial warfare, or as Obregon would put it, nihilistic, there is no war strategy. It's just who can blow who up, and there's no winner, right? Does that make sense? And so war in Mexico becomes kind of a picture for what will happen in the Cold War in particular, but it's like just this, there's no sense of strategy in my army beat your army. It's just a straight, everyone's got a gun pointed at everyone else and everyone's going to kill everyone. There's no real winner here. So when Carranza is killed, it gets out of the way for Calles. There's 3 C's, and he is going to set up a constitution. And that is going to bring some sense of stability. And what does he do? He pays off all the revolutionaries. Got it? Well, the problem with paying off a revolutionary is Benito Juarez is on land redistribution. So what does he do? He basically has the landlord over here eliminated and gives Morales to the peasants while the rest of Mexico stays the same. Pancho Villa is given a hacienda. And then as they're paid off, hitmen kill them both off. Got it? While they're sitting in their farms at home, and they're basically just where they know they're at, and they're just slowly executed, in their beds. Got it there? And so they're beat up, but Calles, I'm saying that wrong. I said that the most white way possible. Calles is the one that kind of ends the mass thing that's going on. He accepts an election. And the election is going to end up with actually the most important guy of the Mexican Revolution is this. Lázaro Cárdenas. Okay? Lázaro Cárdenas is a socialist. Now, we haven't talked extensively about what socialist means, but I'm going to say the government is going to own property. Okay? And he comes in and he basically runs on what is known as the Revolutionary Party. It's the PNR because that's the word revolutionary, that's the word party, and this is the word national in Spanish. But it's all out of order, you know, in how you speak Spanish. So the PNR is coming in there. It's the Revolutionary Party, which is probably how you'll put it in there. And he basically sets up a one-party system, like the communists, but he's not communist, okay? But he is socialist. Now, here's what that means. When he comes to power, in this, mind you, in the 1930s, so in the middle of the Great Depression, he is going to do what's, don't confuse this word, nationalize oil. What does that mean? Mexico owns all of this country of Mexico, the government, owns all the oil there. Now, who did that just tick off? ExxonMobil. Got it? So in the middle of the Great Depression, the company, ExxonMobil, is kicked out of Mexico, and the Mexican government takes over pumping oil in Mexico. With that, they will fund an education that is entirely free, all the way up through college, all the way up through PhD. So, in a normal town in Mexico, what you'll see today is some sort of industrial plant. Okay, I've done a couple of mission trips there where it's like this this is like a smaller village. And basically everyone walks up from the village into the industrial plant. The most famous ones are, right now, are Volkswagen. That's where they build all their cars, is in Mexico. German, never mind. You get the idea. And then why do they build them there? Because then they can ship them for cheap to the United States as opposed to building them in Germany and trying to boat it over, and then labor is cheaper. And so one of the mission trips I was on, you had an engineer, think about this, living on a dirt floor in one of the best houses in the village, right? And then he's walking up to work. More educated than I am, more ability, I'll just say, to build stuff than I am. And if you could transfer him into his skills in the United States, he's got a $120,000 a year job automatically. Everyone kind of picture it there? And so he nationalizes oil, sets up free schooling, and he wins over basically everyone else in the entire country, and all the peasants particularly, by basically increasing the standard of wealth and bringing some sense of what I just described there, industrialization, to even the small villages that are coming out throughout Mexico. Everyone got it there? But with this also comes a sense of corruption, okay? In the first election that he is running against, Cardenas is running against someone else, the feeling of the revolution never quite ends. And if there is a significant minority party leader that's going to come and defeat the Revolutionary Party, they end up dead. And that is true from 1932, the second election Cardenas ran in, all the way to until the year 2000. So Vicente Fox is the first in the year 2000, Revolutionary Party member to actually win an election in Mexico. And so it introduces a whole set of corruption, because think all of this is super valuable, and now the government is a major financial player within the rest of Mexico City, and it's big money on whether who's in charge of it sort of idea. Okay? All of this leads to a large set of, I'll say it this way, in terms of regionalized, in the South, not the deep South, but kind of the middle South where Mexico City is, there's a relatively stable financial and political situation. But it has no real control in the North, and that's why you hear all of the drug lord stuff that's going on. If you look in the deep South, there are groups that are still running around like Juarez, the Zapistas, and they are trying to get Mexico back into its agricultural roots with no industrialism going on there. You can kind of picture it there. And for many of the remember, Mexico is not a third world country, it's a second world country. We'll talk about more about what that means later on. They have a significant amount of industrialism compared to, say, like the middle of Africa. Got it? And they actually, in terms of wealth, are in the top 60% in terms of overall. But that wealth distribution is the biggest deal. He fixed that by basically turning them into socialists, but then there's still a large issue in regards to the hacienda thing that's going on there. Okay? Did I run out of time? Is that it? Bye, Adelina and Ava.